Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar, Finding the National Security Leaders of Tomorrow, with special speaker Justen Baxter. So Justen Baxter is the sourcing team manager of Defense and National Security over at SAIC. He has over 12 years experience in the sourcing and recruiting space, which is pretty incredible. He's cyber social media investigator expert certified, OSINT certified, and the president of the SourceCon Maryland chapter. So without further ado, would you like to take things from here, Justen?
Yes, I would. Thanks, Kelsey. And thank you, everybody out there virtually. I'm very excited to just show a couple bells and whistles and tricks of the trade to find and uncover military and security cleared talent in the defense industry using Seekout, as well as using other partner tools that I use to augment Seekout and some of our efforts. So I lead a team of around 15 sourcers now. We uncover talent across the spectrum, from basically, software engineers, developers, to folks going a CONUS on assignments. And Seekout has been an amazing tool, a foundational tool, and something that has really enhanced our ability to uncover this talent for our customers and to serve the mission. So without further ado, I'll start getting into this a little bit. First thing to know, and I didn't know when I first broke into DoD, I mean, I have some family in the military, but what a MOS is. And for some of you in the industry, you may already know, or you may be, former military yourself. The U.S. Army categorizes the jobs performed by what's called an MOS, or a military occupational specialty. So every MOS is known by its code. 80% of these roles do translate to some type of civilian role. And a common one that many of you may want to be familiar with if you're recruiting, especially tech talent, is the 25 Bravo or 25B, also known as the Information Technology Specialist. So kind of a foundational one. That's, they end up being network engineers, systems administrators, help desk. Many times they work, can work in a very stressful environment. So in many cases, that can be a really good MOS to target when you're going after talent, former 25Bs, that is. So most military members use this code to describe what kind of job they do. I have a couple up here, 68 Whiskey, 18 Delta, Special Forces, which I've recruited for. They can be rather difficult to uncover for obvious reasons. The Air Force has their own specialty codes, and Navy has their own classifications as well. So, one thing, and this can be applicable not just for us in defense. I really look at an agile sourcing methodology, meaning you're going in, you're doing a wide-based search, but the foundation of that search should be research. So 2 sites that I use, and there's many more out there. I know Glenn Cathy has some posts way back when, which are great, but the Balanced Careers is one that I use. I like to look at acronyms and just understand, if I don't really know what that MOS is, really fully understand what they're doing, and really understand fully kind of in terms of the role, what is that role doing in terms of the civilian space. So I looked at the 25B in the Balanced Careers, and that correlates to the Information Technology Specialist. Then I search for what civilian jobs may correlate to those skills. And then I may search for terms like deployment or a CONUS to find folks if they're currently overseas, or if they have been overseas, because that may tell me, hey, this person might be transitioning and maybe they'd be willing to move anywhere. Maybe I have a role that's in a very remote or rural location, either in the United States or abroad. So not saying all the times that people have deployed, they would be willing to deploy again, but they are more likely than not more willing to than the average military or DoD civilian, because they have done some type of deployment. And DoD civilians also do this as well, so they don't have to be military specific. So I like to get in and target competitor organizations that I'm recruiting from. Obviously, you need to use a bit of inference, because when you're going out there, folks aren't going to always put their clearances out on social. At least they shouldn't be, for OPSEC reasons. Now, people still slip up. Both civilians and military personnel do slip up and put that on there, although they should not be. So I start out by looking at competitor organizations, and then, as I said, for OPSEC reasons, they're not really supposed to, but you still can scrape and find folks. So I normally will run a search initially for the clearance specifically, and then from there I'm going to do something probably more broad if I'm not able to get what I need in that initial Boolean search based on like TSSCI, for example. So yes, social media is not a job board. Not meant to be, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Can you find these folks? Yes, but they're not going to say I'm TSSCI. They're going to say, I'm Booz Allen, or I'm confidential, or I'm formerly DoD, or I've deployed. Well, that guy or individual is probably more likely cleared or is associated or connected to people who are. This is less about your sourcing and more about your intent. Coming into sourcing these personnel, understanding kind of, where to find folks, maybe off-grid. And I use the term off-grid when I'm talking about candidates who may not be on like a job board or on some type of, easy to find place. When you need to go and do a deep dive search for that special forces, individual, or somebody highly cleared, like a Yankee White clearance or a polygraph clearance. These are things to think about. So you can find them on sites like WikiLeaks and Reddit and subreddits and gaming groups, and there's other off-grid things. So sites like TikTok, for example, they are banned by armed service. So technically, military service members are not supposed to be using TikTok and be out on there. I know the Army is still using it for recruiting purposes, to my understanding. But if you do find folks, especially on like WikiLeaks, I think it is best to try to help them, even if you're not able to recruit them, but make them aware that, they've been basically doxxed, which in the hacking world is saying, their information has been revealed and publicized on public record. And I'm not talking about the people that put their information on clearance jobs or clear jobs. I'm talking about somebody is unaware and they're on a WikiLeaks site or some other site with their, personal information and job details or responsibilities. More than likely, it's going to be somebody in the intelligence community, although it could be a, DoD civilian. It could be, somebody in the service, somebody working interagency. Let them know how you found them. Let them know the breadcrumbs. Make them aware so that hopefully they can get themselves off of that site. So that's just, the intent to help. I think, I know this is going far and beyond just trying to make a connection for somebody for a job, but, if we're in the community here, I think it's really important to do this and be transparent. So life after leaving the military, Army and other branch vets are qualified for a variety of IT roles. As I mentioned before, the 25B, they can do system administration, network engineering. Some are coming out with multiple certs. Some get a CISSP and they're ready to step into a pen testing role, a cyber systems administrator role, or something more robust than help desk. So it really runs the gambit. So be open-minded when you talk to them. I like to see, what do they want to do? What have they done? What certs do they have? What certs are they working on? I think it's important to understand holistically the candidate and, what they've been through. If they want to tell you they may have worked a CONUS in a green zone and they had to do, network configurations under some type of extreme stress or pressure, that may make them a great candidate to come in and continue working on a similar mission or, like mission. Those are some certs that they can work on. Again, this harkens back to understanding their history. I think being empathetic when you engage them is very important. Being able to relate and empathize with deployments. You may engage with a military spouse within the community as well, understanding where they're coming from, understanding the sacrifice of leaving their families. I think asking them to just uproot and go start a job in Colorado when they're just getting back from, a CONUS assignment, I think you need to be transparent with them and understanding, if the role does require some type of CONUS travel or travel at all, they may be sensitive to that because they've been away from their family. So, you want to walk that back and fully understand where they've been and be patient to what they're looking for. And this applies not just to military or DoD civilians or our intelligence community, but I believe this also is imperative if you're looking at any industry. If I'm recruiting a nurse or a nurse practitioner, understanding she may be a traveling nurse and we want to be aware that she may not want to be, traveling quite as much. So understanding what some of those motivational factors are is critically important. And really, I hearken back to this, is empathize with what they've sacrificed. And it may not be just overseas, but our DoD civilians have to work in a skiff without their phones, and they could go work in the tech space and, lay around on a beanbag chair. Not quite that environment sometimes in the DoD world, but the technology is definitely there. So really, as I hearken back to, doing a more broad-based or agile-based sourcing methodology, I like to go in, do my research, and kind of see where my search takes me a little bit. So have structure, but be aware that as you notice trends in profiles, getting certain results, and I do use the AI Seekout robot, which is great. I also do off-grid searches, and I may see results from and compare them to what the AI is giving me to what I can do on some other sites, and kind of putting together, complex trend analyses and understanding, okay, well, this MOS means this or this means that, and it looks like these competitors are really hiring in these capabilities. So I think understanding who lost won a contract, where demand is going, what's on the horizon. If you know that a certain organization just won a major program with XYZ at DARPA and it's in this type of technology, well, you might want to find out not just who that big prime contractor is, but who are all their subs, their staffing agencies. Who are those smaller B players that we can go target? Because maybe we can't pull from Lockheed Martin, but maybe we can pull from XYZ. So really taking a holistic view and then peeling it back. So consult with data in mind to further shape your requirements, compensation. I'm not saying you can't use anecdotal. And by anecdotal, I'm saying you're talking with a hiring manager and saying, I went on clearance jobs and could only find 12 candidates. I'm not saying you don't bring that to the table, but I think hard data is really important, and leveraging data and then being able to storytell with that data to further shape requirements and compensation. There are instances where they can sponsor. There are instances where maybe they don't, need a cert coming in. They don't need the CISSP coming in, and you can work out maybe obtaining the CISSP within 6 months. Maybe they can get that Azure certification or AWS certification, but they have the foundation of DevOps, in their background. So those are just some of the things to think about. And now I'll get into actually the sourcing aspect. So thanks for bearing with me on this. And now we'll get into Seekout. So I don't know how many of you have seen Seekout. If you haven't and you're doing any flavor of federal IT or even any other industry, I definitely recommend it as really that foundational tool within your stack. So I still use other tools to augment what I'm doing with Seekout, but this is normally my go-to. I use it really as like a first step in tandem with some competitor analysis tools, which I'm going to show later on. So I just ran a basic search, and I just did 25B. I chose Lockheed Martin because I decided to pick on them, but you could also do, any other prime or smaller contractor. But for sake of this, I did Lockheed, and then I picked some past titles, and I pulled up Sherry Jameson. And I already pulled this up, but if you don't have the email and phone number, you can just pull in emails and phone numbers. And this nice little green check tells us that it's verified, which is awesome. So I have several ways to contact Sherry. So she looks really good. She's interested in photography, and she has some other interest outside of cyber. She's a former 25B. So she has her master's. So let's take it a step further, right? So I would click here and pull up her profile. So now we're going to pull Sherry up. So let's say, okay, I want to view a little bit more on Sherry. So an augmented tool, another tool that I use, partner tool, we can call it, in conjunction with Seekout is Crystal. I also use Imantech as well, which I'll show after this, but Crystal is really advancing quickly. Very impressed with what their algorithm brings back from a personality standpoint. So, marketers can use this. We can certainly use this as a recruiter. So it gives us kind of a personality analyses based on social analytics. And it tells us, how are we engaging? And it gives us advice based on the AI on how to engage to get the best possible response. It gives us a shape of her personality, her communication style, her motivation, her work. And you can take this a step further. So let's say I need to email her. And say I want to schedule a meeting. And it actually gives you advice on how you negotiate, how you would schedule, how you would approach her. It tells you what to avoid. So for me, I ask a lot of questions, probably too much. And I would know going in with her, don't ask personal questions. Don't reschedule my meetings. Be sure I'm on time. I mean, that's a no-brainer for us as recruiters, but pay close attention to these things. Discuss realistic solutions. She wants an in-depth conversation. Some people are want more brevity. Verbally recognize her expertise. So I do this normally anyway, but I would just make sure that, I talk about what she's done in her career as a 25B and working up in her career. So, what's good for one person won't be good for every candidate because we're dynamic as humans and we all have different personality traits. So it gives us an understanding of how we would engage. And now it's just giving us recommendations. Is it a call to action? You go to email templates, recruit for a job. Here it is. So it actually will spit back to you, kind of just a little email that it feels she would respond to. Now, you don't have to use this verbatim, right? But you may take aspects of this and incorporate into, maybe your CRM or how you're engaging, maybe a text. You may take some components of this for your call. But I have found a lot of success in using Crystal to better engage candidates because it gives you a more holistic view. So another tool is, and I'm really blown away by human predictions right now. Human predictions is an awesome AI tool. It has I think around 58 million profiles, which is freaking amazing. There's about 36 social sites that it scrapes from. What I do love about it specifically is you can add a watch list. So I can put her on a watch list. And what does that mean? That means that any time she adds certain criteria to her profiles across all 36 of those sites, I can get hit with a notification that she's updated a repo, she's updated her profile, she spoke at a conference, she's done X, Y, and Z. And it allows me in real time to be able to engage somebody understanding where they are in that moment in time, and obviously understanding their personality is an aspect of that. So really, really cool. Here, I'll pull up Hugh Lee, for example. And I use this in conjunction with Seekout. Human predictions is really focused more on the tech side, but really, really cool. And then the interest tags, really love this. So you can actually search by specific interest tags. So you could basically hyper target folks to like interest, not just, are you a Python developer? It's going a little deeper into showing you're into Bible study and aviation and, it looks like a lot of outdoors and Python. So really getting a holistic view of that individual. And I'd probably pull him up. Let's see. Yep, we got his personality right here. And his, and his is obviously, that's a cool photo. That's an interesting photo. He's at Lockheed. He's probably cleared. And we look at kind of what makes him tick and how I would engage him, right? And it's going to be a lot different than how I would engage Sherry. They're different people. Highly analytical. He's motivated by working alone. So he really likes autonomy. So if it's a role where he can get relative autonomy or has more autonomy, that may be something that you focus on. And I'm just throwing that out there. Avoid sarcasm. That's hard for me. I'm very sarcastic. So I got to make sure that I probably simmer that down a little bit naturally. You get this nice personality graph. You can get advice, as I showed you before. So that's really cool. So I really use Seekout as a way to uncover the candidate, get some of the contact data, and then I delve deeper with some of these personality tools. And we can pull, and I'll show you Mantech here as well. And Mantech's kind of doing something similar to Crystal. Sorry, just bear, it takes 30 seconds. Nope, there it is. It took 4 seconds. Good job. I was worried. So this is doing similar things to Crystal. It's feeding you back some communication styles that, he may respond to. Is he actually oriented, need for autonomy, high dominance, got it, slightly outgoing, okay. And then you can also get the personalized email. So it'll also feed you that. I use both, honestly. I like Humantech, but I also really like Crystal, so I try to combine both. Obviously, they'll probably advance over time as their algorithms get more robust with more data. But I do like using both in conjunction as partner tools with Seekout as the foundational tool. So back to Seekout here. One thing that's real big here at SAIC, but probably a lot of you, and you could not even be DoD, is diversity. So I think Seekout does a great job. You can do blind searches, although I'm not doing a blind search here. But let's say I want to pull up specific. Remove that. Take off Lockheed. Say GDIT. Specific diversity tags, which is actually pretty difficult to pull up. And so let's say we're looking for Hispanics at GDIT that are former 25Bs. And you can actually pull up folks based on specific diversity tags, which Seekout does an excellent job at this, and it really does help from a D&I perspective. So it's something to think about as well for those of you who maybe are in D&I or, are tasked with certain diversity types of goals, for example. And you can splice and dice this, with various filters. You can use different Booleans. I'm not even going to get into GitHub, which is phenomenal in Seekout and has been spoke about, ad nauseum by, Dean and others, other real thought leaders. I'm just going to go right into the engineering expert. This area specifically, I really, really like for uncovering, the highly scientific, the really niche national security professionals, those who have, patents. A lot of the folks I find on here may not even have a LinkedIn presence. So that's right. Not everybody's on LinkedIn, believe it or not. And sometimes when you're getting into some of the research fields, they may be on Google Scholar or, Kaggle or other types of basic like patent sites. So it's a little bit getting into the off-grid kind of sites as opposed to going and doing manual x-rays, which can be exhaustive. Really you can do it all, and it's much quicker. You can uncover these folks. You still have to use inference. You're not going to spell out that, but you can gather that if you have enough data. So there's related topics here that come up, and I'm just using signal processing as a example, and I'm not going to choose all of these, but it gives you related topics related to your search, and you may fine tune this. It could be something acoustics related. It could be, different components, and then you can choose conference or journal. So you don't want to choose both. So we can find folks that maybe attended, and I wouldn't know. I could find out through research all these different conferences, but I'm not going to know, and new conferences pop up. So I'm not going to know all these conferences just off the top of my head. And obviously we get obscure positions in sourcing all the time. So this helps us do a little bit of that groundwork research just out of the gate. And you'll end up seeing things and learning things because you'll say, oh, that's an interesting conference. And then maybe you want to go and, x-ray that conference outside of Seekout potentially, or engage with people in that conference. So that's the conference. And then this is the fun part. So some people will put this information out there. We can target, and I'll throw Lockheed in here again, just for giggles. Who else should we put in here? And obviously you could go on and list competitors, list agencies. I'm forgetting a big one. Oh yeah, those guys. And then you can put in additional Boolean, but I'm going to leave this fairly broad because I don't have a ton of criteria. Normally takes 3 seconds. There we go. So we got Doug Nelson, who's at NSA. So we know he's at least poly cleared. Who else we got? Gregory Kovacs. It's interesting. Oh, there's Alan Steinhardt. We have 2 verified emails, which is awesome, plus the work. So I could go and take this email and cross-reference it in Hunter.io, which I'll show you in a minute. But for now, we'll just look at all these numbers. That's a plethora of numbers. That is awesome. And it looks like he's on Google Scholar. Now, he does have a LinkedIn. I bet there's some folks here that don't have LinkedIns. Well, he has a LinkedIn. Some of these, looks like they all do have LinkedIns. Even our DARPA person. Program manager at DARPA. So he's probably connected with a lot of folks. Okay, here's one. Let's see him. Yeah, he's got no LinkedIn. So this is somebody, you could be on LinkedIn Recruiter day and night. You could be x-raying LinkedIn. You would never find him. So the only way you're going to find him is through one of these 3 sites or using a really awesome tool like what I'm using now with Seekout. So one thing I like to do if I find somebody like this, I may look at who their co-authors are. And this is where you can kind of delve a little deeper. So you can also look at your company's connections. So I could see like what other people at my organization have connections with this individual at DARPA. And maybe I use them as a way to bridge that gap, right? But I can also look at what I like to say is, like birds flock together. He's got a lot of co-authors. And I guarantee these other co-authors are poly cleared, although some in academia may not be. But for the most part, you can pull that string and kind of piece together that individual has these other people who co-authored with them on basically a similar type of work, and that just broadens your candidate pool, because some of those co-authors, obviously they're going to know each other, they're going to be involved in that same kind of research focus. So that's what I would do with like David if I was looking for folks at that particular customer, the Maryland customer, who are likely CI or full scope poly. I look at his co-authors, and you can also pull up all of his patents. And that's also something else to take into consideration is, these folks really like to talk about their patents and things that they've done. More than likely, David's co-authors, Daniel being one, and I wouldn't have found Daniel. Obviously, he didn't come up in the first search. But if I look at co-authors, he did come up. So he's co-authored doing pattern recognition, statistics, and AI for NSA. He doesn't have a LinkedIn. He may be somebody, and it looks like, if I talk to David, I may mention I spoke to Daniel. If I talk to Daniel, I'll mention, I may have spoke to David because they know each other. So whoever you talk to, and just be transparent and let them know, hey, I noticed you guys are co-authors. And, again, if you normally name drop somebody else within a very small community, it's that familiarity, and they're going to open up a little bit more. So that's going to help. You can also mention patents, repos if it's on GitHub. But for these folks, I like to talk patents quite a bit. I mean, here's something he did, biometric speaker classification, which is really cool. So that's the engineering suite. I could probably do an hour on just this, but I'm not gonna bore you. So we can move on to another tool here. One thing I really like to use, and and this is something where, I've been getting more into kind of zapping for military folks recently, and just seeing what some of those results are. So one thing I've done is combine kind of like on the ground research with what I'm able to do within Zap Info, which is an awesome tool. So I'm going to do an example, and it's going to be a pretty broad search. I'm not walking through A to Z, but if you know the name of a specific, warship, for example, and I knew about the USS Baton because I did some research on it, and I knew that they're stationed down in Norfolk, so I did Norfolk, Virginia Beach. And then and Zap Info has a lot more. I'm not paying them justice in terms of this little 3-minute bit. I could do an hour on the amazingness of Zap Info, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to show you a basic Facebook search. So I would run that. Here's the results. And essentially, now I've found all folks who basically, and it's an OPSEC nightmare, but I've got 495 results of folks who either are on the USS Baton or have been on it, or basically have listed it on their Facebook profiles in the Norfolk or Virginia Beach area. I could run other searches with other criteria like deployments, OCONUS, leaving, et cetera. You can go on and on. You can pull that string, but I'm not going to, for sake of argument, I'm not going to do that. But the result after I would scrape this would be this, and I'd pull this out from Zap. I'm not going to show you, I'm not going to bore you with it scraping, but like I can basically take all these emails, and I did get some .mils and .govs, so I could. Now I don't email .mils or .govs, but I would then find Pamela's like personal email. I'd probably use like Hunter IO and some other tools to do that. But you can go and take this information and then drop it into your ATS or your CRM, and then further target market from there. So you could take somebody here, then obviously cross-reference them to LinkedIn, then run them through Crystal, run them through human predictions, and certainly you can go and find email addresses on Hunter IO. So like there's kind of a plethora of ways to approach it. But I went in here and I went in somebody's profile and I pulled that string, and then I found, oh, okay, this is a main site. And then I found, okay, here's all the main commanding officers. And then I, pulled up this commanding officer, Gregory Leland. Looks like a nice guy. Pull him up. And so from here, I could then run personality analysis, but even more so, we can then so let's say we're recruiting for commanding officers or people connected to this commanding officer. I can then go and find out who their connections are, further do personality analysis, further pull that string even more to find out like connections, find out personal email, personal contact data, and kind of from there, triangulate how I would engage this individual or individuals connected to him. We're also both in the same group of the intelligence community, which is cool. So I may name drop that. So, you got to kind of play around with it and synthesize what the data is bringing back to you. Go back to Huli here. Show you. Yeah, this is really cool. Yeah, and then I would probably run him through to figure out like if he has any interest tags, and then I could search based on those interest tags as well as like skills, so that you can like basically further triangulate and target your search criteria. So you're really micro-targeting as much as possible. I'm not big on mass messaging unless you have to do that. I really like to be as targeted as possible and try to get a really high response rate. wherever possible. I know that's hard for us, but these types of tools make that possible to do, some mass, but make it a little more micro-targeted. So it's fairly accurate. And don't get me wrong, if you don't have this, I would totally use Insights and Seekout. But if you have it, it's a little more robust. So you could just run your search based on certain criteria here. So I put in a job title. I put in that type of position. So this is the output. And again, this would be what I would use in my discovery call or intake call. So I'm doing this before I do all the other homework. So if we reverse engineer it, this would be my step one. And I may be doing this program wide. I may be looking at, using this on a rec-to-rec basis, maybe pipelining. So you can, it's certainly versatile when you're looking at it from a consultation standpoint. So I ran my search. It was a, cyber systems engineer with a CISSP. They wanted to have vulnerability analysis. It's for local markets, about a 94% difficulty. For the national markets, 92%. It's not a big difference, but you will see a delta there. Like say I'm looking for the same person in Omaha, Nebraska. That delta, it could be 94%, and then it could be 0. or it could be so difficult that it's not. There's sample size is so small that it doesn't even come up. So that tells us, when there's no data, it's null because of a lack of sample. That also is telling us a story, right? So the median salary here is around 143. These are the skills and certs, like skills. So based on the criteria of the position, these are the other job titles that come back. I know we're coming up on time here. This is our active competition to target. This is historical hiring, and I'll get into this on another spreadsheet. These are degrees, gender, ethnicity breakdown, alternate locations. So I find this very helpful for what we do, but you can use this outside of the defense industry, obviously. So, there may be other pockets of these folks that you can target where they have, that type of clearance and those requirements and those certifications. For me and my team, this is immensely beneficial because, we're purple squirrel hunters and everything we get is generally a purple squirrel. And I'm sure some of you on the phone have this, even if you're not in DOD. And it allows us to see, okay, where are there other top secret cleared professionals who meet that criteria where I can pull from, right? And then what's the hiring scale? And so I can go and target folks from some other areas and maybe try to see if we can maybe reload them. Or maybe I want to consult and influence with that hiring manager in the business to open up a relocation budget, a sign-on budget, because maybe that local talent is either outside of our rate. But if I can't tell a story other than, oh, I went on clearance jobs, couldn't find anybody, can you give me relo? Whereas this is hard data saying, hey, this is where some other pockets of these folks are. So it's a way to leverage data and let the data be the bad guy, not us as the recruiting professionals. We reflect the market. We don't create the market. So here's a hiring scale heat map with the pockets. I really like that because I'm pretty visual. I like the colors. It's really nice. So that's one example. And then I can peel this deeper. So these are all the counts within the last 4 years of that skill set. We are number one. So, I know all the big players, most of these big players. Where I find this immensely beneficial is when we get to these smaller players. And this changes, right? Because if they're posting jobs for those skills, they probably have those folks already, right? So now we can go and run personality profiles on them from a social engineering standpoint. We can uncover them through our 1,000 million Chrome extensions that exist. You probably only need 5, but yeah, we can go and pull that string. But yeah, I mean, looking here at this, right, from here down, really, I'm not familiar with some of these. Some of these are 8As. They're probably staffing companies, small businesses, HubZone, any different myriad of other integrators, right? And you can apply this outside of the defense industry as well, because you want to know who your competition is, who's posting jobs over the last year or 4 years. And now let's go figure out who all those folks are, where they are. Let's triangulate that, and then let's go and target market them, and target recruit them. So that's really how I use this from a sourcing perspective, and then providing this to the hiring manager along with that robust, data point, and using the data to be the bad guy and trying to get them to kind of hopefully change their mind on maybe some of those restrictions that are applied to us.
We have some questions that I would like to get answered just around the tools that you were mentioning. So Crystal and Human Predictions. Margaret Burke was asking, are these free? And do these tools operate in the background when you're on sites like LinkedIn?
Yeah, so all of these, I believe, Crystal's like $30. Humantech is so I don't believe any of these are completely free. I think there's like a free trial for Humantech. Zap, yeah, but most of these are nominally priced. I think you've really got to go and run the numbers. I think all of my Chrome extensions are fairly nominally priced. Machine Sourcer, which I was going to show, is free. And that was the next one I was going to show, but we don't have time. I want us to be able to maybe get into Hunter.io. I think it's like $30. I mean, a lot of these are nominally priced, so they're not like entirely free, but like what you're going to get back. And yes, they do run in the background. Seekout, is again, like not free, but for me, if I'm going to give up anything, Seekout is the last thing I'm giving up. Seekout and Talent Neuron are probably my last two. Zap I see as like that number one augmented tool. And I really love Crystal right now. It's hot. And I really like Human Predictions. Humantech's okay. It's a lot more affordable, I think, than Crystal, but I think you get more bang for your buck with Crystal. And I wanted to get into, check out Machine Sourcer, which is free, and it automates like all your outreach. And I would also check out Hunter.io as well. So to answer her question, no, they're not all free. Sorry.
We have from Michelle Boggs. Why wouldn't you send an email to a .mil or .gov address?
Because I'd rather go and get their personal email and reach them on a personal channel. I don't, as a standard practice, email .govs and .mils, because those are our customers and there can be issues with that. And there's tools out there where, more than likely, they're going to respond to a personal email, personal text when they get out of the skiff anyway. So I'd much rather approach them through those channels. And also, I just don't want to email anyone on their government emails.
Makes a lot of sense, Justin. Well, I think that wraps things up for today. I can't thank you enough for hosting such a phenomenal webinar. I know I learned a lot today, and I hope everybody at home did as well. If anybody would like to learn more about Seekout, you can just go to our website, seekout.io/demo. Thank you.